Our next speaker is the editor-in-chief of Wired UK. You know that Wired has a US version, there is also a UK version, there is also an Italian version. He runs an absolutely amazing conference, the Wired conference I was attending last year, and it's really great. And he thinks that if you're a web entrepreneur, you should move to Africa. He's going to share his vision with us. Please help me welcome David Rowan. Welcome.
Thank you.
You need the remote?
Yeah, but I got a little thing I brought with.
Oh, okay.
I've got here the solution to poverty in Africa. Do you want to see it? It's also the tool for holding the corrupt politicians to account. It's also the way of creating a great level of education. I'm dying to show it to you. It's rather beautiful, isn't it? This is a submarine cable that's been laid, this one on the east coast of Africa, by Seacom and Interroute, and it's transforming opportunities. And the internet is finally arriving in Africa. And I'm going to explain why, and why it creates ways to change people's expectations in real time. So I'm going to pay homage to Steve Song, who maps out over time the changing nature of broadband cable around internet. So this was 2009, not very much bandwidth. But suddenly now, in real time, there are ships that have been cabling up east and west coast. And this is what it's projected to look like by 2013. And we're talking huge amounts of bandwidth, 1.2 terabits per second. And that creates massive new opportunities and new ways of thinking. It creates the possibility for people without huge funding to go online, start a business, create a tool to reach other people. And this is the moment. So I was talking to my friend Juliana Rotich, one of the founders of Ushahidi, the crowdsourcing platform, who's also one of the people who's set up the iHub in Nairobi. Kenya, being one of the coastal countries, is one of those that have been benefiting early on from these cables. And the iHub is where lots of entrepreneurs are gathering as a co-working space. And I was saying, so what does this mean in practice? It's like that New Yorker joke about on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. You can reinvent your identity. On the internet, no one knows you're poor. So you have a chance for the first time to tell your own story, to create a new set of norms. And if you look at the numbers, the opportunity is there. The projections for economic growth in Africa over the next few years, GDP growth, just look at it. Biggest countries rising, Ethiopia, Mozambique, Tanzania, Ghana. This is new. And there's a new middle class emerging. So the countries with, this is Bain, projected for the greatest growth in consuming fast-moving consumer goods, the red ones. There's Egypt, there's Nigeria, there's Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, South Africa. Because we're coming from an incredibly low base. Africa missed out on the desktop internet era. So the start of the decade, 4.5 million internet users, tiny, 0.6%. Grew a lot, 140 million now, but what about the other billion? Tiny penetration still, about 13.5%. Compare that with Europe, almost 2/3. And it's coming. But it's not going to be through the desktop computer, it's going to be through the mobile device. In Kenya at the moment, about a quarter of the population has internet access, but almost all of them are getting it through a mobile device. And the smartphone is arriving, and it's cheaper because it's targeted at those local markets than the Western iPhone types. This is one from the Chinese company Huawei, which was marketed in Kenya at $80. Kenya, about 40% of the population lives on less than $2 a day. They sold out. They sold 350,000 of these pretty quickly. So it's becoming a bit of a cliche that it's Africa's moment, but I just want to show you some examples of why it's Africa's entrepreneurial moment, particularly in the startup world. So the iHub is just one of the collaborative workspaces that's becoming a magnet for this entrepreneurial talent. The iHub in Nairobi, but they're everywhere. Hive Collab in Uganda, Bongo Hive in Lusaka. We're even getting new nicknames. So Cape Town is Silicon Cape. We have Silicon Roundabout in East London, which isn't quite so glamorous. And the infrastructure isn't there yet, so there is a downside. This is a picture we took in Lagos, Nigeria, future expressway and a dotted line. So there are challenges. The infrastructure, in terms of power, isn't always reliable. There's still a lot of corruption in a lot of these places. There isn't very much startup funding. But I think there's going to be a transition. There are funds being raised at the moment to invest locally. So the heroes of all this are the people laying the cables, because they have connected the continent to the rest of us. So we joined one of the ships, the Tycho Resolute. It was on a journey to lay 8,400 kilometers of cable all across Africa, from Egypt to South Africa, and then it was laying extra cable going to India, to the Gulf, and eventually connecting it to London via Marseille. And it's a huge project. This is on the ship. They have these great machines that go underneath and deliver that cable under the water. And this is it, connecting to land. And some interesting things happen. Price of bandwidth collapses. So before, in Kenya, people mostly relied on duplex satellite links to get bandwidth. So if you were a wholesaler, you'd pay maybe $2,003 a month for 1 meg per second. After the CCOM cable came, the price went down to about $100. And we met this gentleman, Gerald Maruhi. He's a coffee farmer. This is him with his wife. Not a major coffee farm. He grows about 3,500 kilos a year. But he never got very good prices. There were lots of middlemen taking their share. So at some stages, he even got like 20 or 50 Kenyan cents per kilo, which is pennies. And the middlemen were selling for even up to 100 times as much. And he was really pretty unhappy about this. Having worked for a year on the farm and then to get only 50 cents on a kilo when the market is okay, prices are higher, a lot of middlemen are taking advantage of us. So how can access to information help Gerald? So I was talking to Eric Hirstman, who blogs as White African. He's also one of the people behind the iHub in Kenya. And he actually sees a great opportunity, because on the edge, when there are problems to solve, you will solve them in your own way. You will take those local dynamics and find that solution. He says the West needs to be more like Africa. And there are companies already in Africa that are going global. They don't have their Facebook yet, but for instance, out of South Africa, Mixit, instant messaging becoming a social network, 3 times as many users in South Africa as Facebook, and they're claiming up to 25 million users internationally. So one of the great success stories is M-Pesa, a peer-to-peer money transfer that uses your basic mobile phone, feature phone, not a smartphone, because not many rural banks, not many ATMs in village Kenya. So about 4 years ago, Vodafone's local subsidiary with the British government's development ministry set up this system where you could load money on your account through roadside kiosks, and to transfer money, you just need someone's phone number and your PIN number. It's been such a success that about $8 billion has transferred through that system so far. About a quarter of the GDP of Kenya is said to be going through M-Pesa. And in December, just in Kenya, more money was transferred than the whole of Western Union globally. That's local needs being met. But what's really interesting is last week, Barclays in the UK copied it. They launched Ping It, the easy way to send money from your mobile phone. Where did they get that idea? So there's an ecosystem growing around this mobile money transfer. There isn't this very, very established banking infrastructure. This is Augusto Lico of PesaPal. So he's trying to create a way to link the mobile transfer to the banking system, the checks, the credit cards. If you have to pay school fees for your kids in one of the schools there are fees for you and for the school. And he's saying the people who are using his system, PesaPal, can save $1,000 or $2,000 per school a year. He says there's no world-class payment system there now, targeted at consumers. So you've got all these Visa accounts and lots more mobile money accounts. So he's built a bridge. So I think it's about finding these opportunities to serve local needs and to do something which can scale. And that's just one of a whole bunch of mobile money services that's being launched. Now, who here watches Blackberry Babes? Oh, you should do it. It's great. It's kind of Nigeria's best sitcom-type drama. In fact, on YouTube, 1.6 million views of one of the episodes of this series. There's a channel set up by a bunch of entrepreneurs, Iroko Partners, called Nollywood Love. And they've done a revenue share with YouTube. They've bought the rights to a bunch of Nollywood films, the local version of Bollywood or Hollywood, and a lot of TV series. And whenever there's an ad there, they split it with Google. So in their first year, they say they had $1 million in revenue coming through. They built up to about 40 staff. They just said, actually, they're going to do their own thing, create their own channel independently. But you get all sorts of programming, 90 million views just on this Nollywood Love site. And the guy behind it, Jason Yoku, says it's almost like being in Silicon Valley in 1994. You can see Africa waking up to the real power of the internet. So what about tablets? What about the iPad? Well, this is Saeed Adepoju in Nigeria, who's decided to create Africa's own tablet. So this is the Inya from his company Encipher, designed for local conditions. There isn't universal 3G or Wi-Fi. So this is designed so it can host a dongle. It's also a lot cheaper. This one is about $160. It's great that people locally can say, right, we're going to use technology to create a local business. E-commerce is just starting. Now, it's not the greatest infrastructure for e-commerce in many African countries. There's not reliable post. Stuff goes missing. It's an opportunity. So this is Femi Akinde's business called Slim Trader. He set up a local e-commerce site, Mobi Ashara. Again, you don't need a 3G phone. You can use feature phones. There's even the local Groupons, deal day in a couple of cities in Nigeria. Get photos, get makeups. And I think it's every type of business, there's a rising curve of opportunity. So in advertising and marketing, this is Isis Nyongo. She's running a mobile advertising business in Mobi, where they, every quarter, are serving 15 billion ads just in Africa. This is Joe Mucheru, who was in the UK, but he saw the opportunity, so he moved back. It's the diaspora returning. The buzzword is the re-aspora. He set up a business called Wananchi, which is a triple-play telecoms business. You get your phone, you get your computer, you get your TV, and that's done very well. And then Google tapped him to build their business in Africa. He now runs sub-Saharan Africa for Google. But he sees a fantastic opportunity. So right now in the world, on average, there's one internet domain for 90 people. In Africa, there's one for every 10,000 people. It's not going to be any less. So why wouldn't people locally or internationally want to tap that opportunity? And there's people coming from the UK. This is Stefan Magdalinsky, who was there right at the beginning of the UK consumer internet. He helped build up companies like Up My Street and Moo.com. couple of years ago, he decided, I'm going to go to Cape Town. That's where it's all happening. And he's working with businesses like Locality, which is online directory with Dealfish. Locality, he said, we've signed up 100,000 businesses, of which 2/3 never had any internet presence. I'm proud of the fact that we put 65,000 businesses online for the first time through the mobile device. And again, he says, it's like the mid-90s. When we first saw the internet mentioned in a national newspaper, we cut it out, stuck it to the wall. Africa feels a bit like that now. So I wrote a column saying, this is that great opportunity. The next billionaires are going to come out of Africa. And it caused a bit of a stir. I got more comments than I've had for anything else I've written at Wired. I'm an evil colonialist. I'm angry, blatantly trying to exploit us again. Africa, wake up. Don't let the foreigners try to run our continent. Now, I'm very aware that last time Westerners went into Africa because they saw an opportunity, it didn't end brilliantly. But that's not what I'm thinking. I'm just an internet guy. I'm not a politician. I think it's about creating a platform where there is opportunity for everybody at a low base cost. It's interesting, there was this internal debate happening in the comments where Drakalu joined in and was saying, actually, it's not the greed of the West, the capitalism that's something we must confront. It's the colonial mindset that Africans possess. We're yet to see ourselves as equals and partners in the development of the world. Now, this is all kind of above my pay grade. But I think the internet is a world without borders. It's not about outsiders coming in or diaspora people returning. It's about creating the conditions, allowing the innovation that can develop locally strong businesses and social businesses. I think it's Kerry Eaton, who was working for News Corp in Australia, came to Kenya and set up this, Cheki, which is a fantastically detailed directory for selling cars, selling vans, and that's growing hugely. Now, he's adding to the local economy. They're going door to door, photographing people's vehicles. He's creating a thriving business that's going international. So I think we need more of this. And it's not just, pure financially driven businesses. There are businesses that can be built on social needs. So this is Bright Simons, who set up a business called Empedigree. The World Health Organization says fake medicines is a real problem. Maybe 1 in 5 people who dies of malaria dies because they've had fake medication. So Bright has set up a business that has a code embedded on medicines, and you text it to a number, and it tells you if this is real or if that's not real. Isn't that great? So it's all about a solution based on local needs. So, Apple probably wouldn't like this at the App Store, but iCow is a very basic way for dairy farmers to get through their cell phones updated information about how to look after their pregnant stock. You put in the date that your calf is due, and it gives you advice. And it's like a virtual vet. There's this project, M-Farm, which is going to solve Gerald's problem. It tells you, you just text it, what the local price is for your crops now. So you have information. Much less exploitation when you have data. Best of all, 3 women founders. That's not the typical stereotype of African business. So one of these sorts of services that tells you crop prices is Isoku. There was a study recently that said in Ghana, people using it are getting 10% more income than those who aren't using it. And it's about pretty much everything that the creative innovators can do using the internet to fulfill local needs. So again, in Nigeria, iWatch Live. It's an app that helps you monitor government and local corruption. Every pledge by a politician is put on here. Every time there is some local activity, a street is being renewed or not being renewed, you can put it up here. Everybody else can see. It creates transparency. And you don't even need to have developers. You can use Twitter. So in a village in Kenya, Chief Kariuki, who has responsibility for a small area, tweets. And most of the time you read his tweets, it's about God wanting to live the way he intended for you to live, living in his abundance. But every couple of days, there's real news. there's theft, there's crime that he tweets about. Theft last night of 4 bags of maize, of beans. So there's about 1,100, 1,200 people now following the chief, but the message reaches almost all of the 28,000 people in the villages nearby because people text on the news. So it's become an information hub. So I would like to conclude that your opportunity, both in Africa and entrepreneurs who see ways to help Africa, can redefine the stereotype. So I think we need to reclaim the stereotype, or Africa needs to reclaim the stereotype. It shouldn't be seen on Western media that Africa is a place of famine, of war, of corruption, of disease. I think, and with your help, we should aim that the new stereotype, the new cliche is Africa is the place where you can't move without an entrepreneur thrusting a business plan at you, or a place where the social innovator comes up with these great local tools that are then copied by the West. Or it's a place where people are using the internet to get a fantastic education by accessing online conferences like this, Stanford University lectures. It should be a place where people are holding the corrupt officials to account with this new spirit of transparency. But I think, most of all, it's about using the internet to make sure every individual has the chance to fulfill their potential, has real opportunity, because finally, they're connected. Thank you.
Great talk, thank you very much. I think what is quite striking, and I heard it also from other people, is that basically right now you have Europeans and Westerners moving to Africa, but you also have African ideas moving back to Europe. Actually, Europe is looking at Africa as a source of great ideas, and you have some European entrepreneurs copying African business models. That's also happening the other way.
So innovation happens when there are cultures colliding, as Eric said, at the edge. Stephen Johnson wrote a book last year about where great ideas come from. And he said the English coffee shop of the 18th century was the place you'd meet the politician, you'd meet the writer, you'd meet the musician, and they'd get into conversations. And suddenly there was this cultural and entrepreneurial renaissance. And I think because there are local conditions that are unfamiliar to the West, new ideas, new business models, new innovations come out. So I think travel, mix up. A place like London or Berlin are experiencing huge entrepreneurial booms because they're quite international places.
Yeah, that reminds me of the early 20th century, actually, in France, La Belle Époque, where you had actually no borders and passports didn't exist, and you had a lot of scientists gathering, and that gave Europe the most innovative period of its history. Thank you very much. That was David Rowan.
Thank
Give
you.
him a warm round of applause.